So many a times we have patients who come with extremely shallow chamber and short eyes. The issues are not only in calculation of the IOL power, but also the intraoperative course and the post-operative prognosis that's going to be different from what we have in the usual cases. And we need to counsel the patient, discuss the problems in advance, so that the patient is prepared for the outcome. And because we may end up with a refractive surprise, we may have an amblyopic eye, and during surgery per se there'll be problems. So let us see a couple of cases. So when do you have a short axial length? It could be a microphthalmic eye, or it could be a relative anterior microphthalmos, that is a short anterior chamber depth and a normal axial length, or it could be a high axial hypermetropia with a normal anterior chamber depth. So there can be multiple combinations of a short axial length. Now, just to recapitulate what really happens in microphthalmos, and when do you call it microphthalmos? As such, different studies have shown different criteria. Some say it's 18 less than 18.5 millimeter axial length. Others say it's less than 20.5 millimeter axial length. But by and large, whenever the axial length adjusted for age is below 95th percentile, that will be labeled as microphthalmos. Now we can have a complex microphthalmos or a simple microphthalmos. In a complex microphthalmos, there will be associated other anatomical abnormalities like colobomas, persistent hyperplastic primary uveitis, or it may be associated with retinal dysplasia. So the likelihood of gaining vision in these patients is quite less, and that has to be explained to the patient beforehand. Then there could be a simple microphthalmos, where there could be a complete microphthalmos, or what we label as nanophthalmos, where it is associated with a smaller cornea, smaller anterior chamber depth, smaller posterior segment, but a normal size lens. So and of course the sclerochoroidal thickening would be more than 1.7 millimeter. The corneal diameter, as I mentioned, less than 11 millimeter. And because of the large lens, the lens to eyeball volume would be somewhere between 11 to 32%, normal being 4%. So then there could be, of course, a partial microphthalmos. So before we proceed to our IOL calculations and overall surgical planning, we must identify what are we exactly dealing with. So the problems would be related to an inadequate maneuvering space within the anterior chamber because of the microcornea, because of the shallow chamber. There may be peripheral anterior synecdoche, and there may be development of chronic angle closure glaucoma. Also, many times the pupil in these patients is non-dilating. We may have a thickened choroid and a sclera. On B scan, it will be picked up. So this is a patient who presented to us with a heterochromia, and the other eye was absolutely normal. In fact, she had multiple abnormalities. Initially, first she came for actually a DCR surgery, and then we realized that she had multiple abnormalities. And I operated the other cataract. She had very good vision. She said, please try it out. Although I have not been able to say since childhood, but I still want to, there was poor vision. She wanted to go ahead with the cataract surgery also after the DCR surgery. In fact, when we did the DCR surgery, there was a problem. There was a very thick bone, and there was some bony abnormalities also associated in this patient. So she had a non-dilating pupil and did a very shallow AC, and the IOL power was 34 diopters. So I thought I'll go ahead and do a phacoemulsification this patient. So this is the usual anterior capsular staining, the anterior chamber entry. And this is the Malugian ring. I am creating a space beneath the iris surface, and you can see the iris texture is also not normal. You can see there are multiple stromal atrophic patches. So this is the Malugian ring being pushed into to dilate the pupil. I did not want to put the iris retraction hooks because I felt that if I am going to do that, it may actually traumatize the sphincter because of this atrophic nature of the iris all around. So I just put the Malugian ring in place. And if you see carefully at the limbus also, you can see a lot of conjunctivalization of the cornea that has occurred here also. So fortunately, this patient had, not that hard a cataract, which could not be managed with phaco. So this is a rhexis being performed. So you can use any form of pupil expander. I have used Meligan because it is available in a hospital. So you do a hydrodissection, and now the key is that you have to work in the center, because as it is, the chamber is very shallow. You have to be very gentle. Go ahead, hold the piece, eat it up in the center, because as you go towards the periphery, the chamber is going to become even more shallow. Also, you have to work at the just below the iris plane, you can see here, so that and this is of course this centurion being used, centurion silver being used for this case. No financial interest, but this is what is available in a hospital. So very gently you have to work in the center. In these patients, don't let the chamber collapse. So immediately, as soon as you feel that there is a chance of chamber collapse, you have to be careful, go slow. And once you debulk and eat the nucleus, there is no chance of doing a stop and chop. So you have to work in the center, go for a direct chop and eat the nucleus. So once this is done, again, very carefully, without allowing the chamber to collapse, you withdraw the instruments. Of course, this part, there is never any problem. The aspiration of the cortex is usually very easy. So after this, the IOL is again inserted. Now this is going to be a thicker IOL, so one has to be careful about making the section adequately large. 34 diopters and all these lenses, they would need their own space to enter. So you should not err on that. So this is the IOL being placed, and this is how you you disengage the Melugan ring, and then with the same injector you push it out. See, this is the iris which was traumatized even by the device that I had used. So if I would have used iris retraction hooks, then it would have really injured the pupillary sphincter. So in this particular case, the take home message is that you have to assess. This patient had a shallow interior chamber, a small axial length, but otherwise, fortunately, the pupil, the nucleus was not all that hard. Now we'll go to the next case. Now this is a very interesting case, and this was a case of complicated microphthalmos with the iridofundal coloboma. And you see here the vision was very poor, PR accurate, and the cornea was small, and the other eye vision was 6/6. So this eye was anyway amblyopic. So I had not planned the IOL in the first sitting. So this is with this kind of a cataract and non-dilating pupil, where I thought I'll go ahead and do an SICS. So a very good tunnel dissection is being done, and you can see that the tunnel, there is nothing wrong. It is absolutely perfect, well dissected, with the triplanar incision being maintained. This is the side pocket dissection. This is the side pot entry. And this is the place for NTH chamber maintainer. I usually like to put an NTH chamber maintainer. And after that, the usual staining. So this pupil was dilated, say about, I think, 4.5 millimeter and not beyond. I thought because they were just planning an small incision, and I usually am able to take out the nucleus easily from the bag, despite the pupil being about 4.55 millimeter. So repeated injection of viscoelastic was being done because the chamber was extremely shallow, and it was so. Though you cannot appreciate it in a two-dimensional view, but every now and then I had to inject visco so as not to injure the endothelium. So this is the rhexis being completed. I had been able to create a sufficiently large rhexis, about 6.5 millimeter, and this was the entry for entering the AC with the keratoconus. So far so good. And now the nucleus was being prolapsed with the hydrodissection, and usually with one go, I am able to bring the nucleus out. But here what is happening is every time I inject, the iris would come out, but the nucleus will not budge. So I kept struggling and struggling, and I could not understand what was going wrong. So I kept injecting. I thought maybe the rhexis was large. What is happening? Why is it not coming? The problem here was that the nucleus was so large and the AC was so shallow that there was no place for it to come out. So after multiple maneuvers, the next problem that occurred was that there was an iridodialysis. So you can see the nucleus is being brought out and it has come out after tearing the iris, and still there is no place to go. So every time again we try to prolapse, the iris was coming out. Finally, I enlarged, I put a Vectis. I decided that the only way out was now to debulk it, because one had to reduce the size so that it would find an entry. So this is just to depict that despite a very good tunnel construction and your rhexis size being normal, you may end up with a problem if your nucleus and the proportion between your anterior chamber volume is not correct. So see, you can see the iridodialysis over there. It's a large iridodialysis, and these patients, I think the idea is that if the patient comes early to it, go for an early surgery. So you can see that there was a complete retinochoroidal coloboma, and you can't see a good glow also from behind. It's a very dirty looking glow. So we did not fiddle much with it, and so if you have such a patient, one thing is these patients may be having a malformation of the heart, kidney and CNS. So one must examine, do a complete systemic examination. Preoperatively, the anterior chamber, anterior segment has to be evaluated, and anterior chamber depth has to be checked. Either if the grade of the cataract is not too much, then you can go for an OCT, or otherwise you can go for a UBM. You must estimate basically the disproportion between the anterior chamber and the nuclear volume when and sorry I'm sorry and so so this is the okay, so this is the B scan that needs to be done to see the posterior segment fold, the retinal and retinal detachment. We must do an op scan for seeing the horizontal wide to wide diameter, and then the IOL power calculation has to be, if a patient needs, like in the previous case, then you have to change your formulae, like you have to use the Haigis or the Hoffer-Q or Holliday 2. And here we need to see it requires insertion of the anterior chamber depth parameters, wide to wide diameter. And the surgical planning in this patient, option one was I should not possibly have gone for a SICS. I could have done a ECC with a very large section, and that would have created a fish mouthing kind of a opening for the nucleus to emerge from the anterior chamber. And the other option was that I could have done an SICS with a very large section very close to the limbus. So this long tunnel should have been avoided. The third option was that I could have gone for a phacoemulsification, broken the pieces, and then taken out one by one. And the fourth option, which has been, I think, published in IGO, I don't remember this thing. What they suggested was to go for a posterior approach to do a phaco-fragmentation from a pars plana route. So these are the different options that, this is the article by Dr. Sen et al. And they propose that a pars plana vitrectomy with phaco-fragmentation could be done for patients with hyperdense cataracts, severe microcornea and chororetinal coloboma. Although I think, with the kind of prognosis and all that, I think all of us would go for an ECC. So thanks so much. I would be very happy to take any questions.